Hello and welcome to this episode of Superhero Ethics. Today we are continuing our journey through Avatar: The Last Airbender, the Netflix live-action edition, with episodes 5 and 6. And once again, I'm joined by Riki of Wikipedia and Paul, the Zen Madman. What do you think of these episodes?
I liked them more than I liked the previous two, which I liked more than the previous two, so that feels good.
Yeah, going in a good direction.
I'm continuing on my trend of Iroh, yes, Aang, no, that I started with last time. And I mean, I don't want to be unfair, but it's polarizing in that way where I really love the Iroh scenes and Zuko, and the Aang scenes like continue to be like, okay, like I guess we have to do this because it is Avatar.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Avatar, the no remaining airbenders, because we wrote the character out of the series. I feel like,
and a lot of that's my bias because I love Iroh, but I started from a place where I was skeptical, and now I'm like on board, fully on board, and the flashback scenes are mixed bag, and I'm sure we'll talk about that as well.
Yeah.
I asked for more Aang and Gyatso, and we got that somehow.
Yeah, I mean, that's the best
including Gyatso being a dick, though. Like, I kind of loved everything except that last moment.
What do you mean?
Which last moment? What are you talking about?
Explain yourself.
That, like, when Aang sees him in the spirit world, Aang says, like, will I see you again when I come back? And Gyatso clearly looks uncomfortable because, at least as I read it, he knew that Aang won't. But he says, no, don't worry, you'll see me again. You'll see me again.
Yeah, that's not being a dick. That's saying what he thinks Aang needs to hear in order for Aang to do what Aang needs to do and not have his friends die because he just wants to chill with Gyatso, is how I took it. I saw that as a self-sacrifice of, I would love to spend more time with Aang, and I would love to be able to tell Aang, no, this is the last time I'm going to be able to see you. But I don't think he was just like, all right, we had that conversation. Now I'm going to, move on to the other stages of enlightenment or something. I think it was like he knew that was all he was going to have the opportunity to give. And that if he tried to hold Aang there, or that if he told Aang, I'm not going to see you again, then Aang wasn't going to want to go. And that what Aang had to go do was important.
Yeah. Okay.
It was like Yoda and Luke, but much more clear that leaving is the correct choice. I think it's still unclear in Empire whether Luke leaving and going to Cloud City is the right choice, and whether like Yoda was just saying, what he needed to say as the master. In this case, I agree with Paul. Like Gyatso's role here, or like his purpose was, he had to give Aang some wisdom, but when push comes to shove, it was like Aang has to go and be the Avatar and save his friends, and that is what is going to enable him or help him to save the world, right? Like his friends in the real world, like non-spirit world,
I don't know,
And so I do find it fascinating that a lot of times it feels like you two are watching one show and I'm watching another.
For sure.
Because that's not how I read that at all. What I mean, I definitely agree with all the things you're saying. I think I do believe, though, that he could have said, this is the last time we'll talk, Aang, but you need to, do what you need to do. And Aang would have done it. To me, and I guess a lot of it's going to be how it plays out. To me, the way it was framed especially felt very much like the point they were making was about, this is yet another person who Aang feels is going to abandon him, in terms of how all of his friends are gone and things like that. And especially like just the way they framed it in terms of like it all being dark and sad and things like that. I could be totally wrong. And again, that's, listeners, let us know. I also think, Riki, you and I have very different understandings of Yoda in Empire Strikes Back, but I've got a whole other podcast to talk about that because I've never for a moment thought Yoda in any way thought Luke leaving was the right thing. But that's a different topic.
I don't think it's presented that way in the movies, but a lot of Star Wars is about reinterpretation and about like applying new lessons to things. So especially for me, the Yoda that appears in The Last Jedi, when he starts talking about like failure is the greatest teacher or whatever, you know, that speech to Ghost Luke, putting that lens back on the Empire scenes, I think you can start to see that Yoda letting Luke go and failing to, you know, defeat Vader is a lesson that Luke needed to learn in that moment.
Okay.
That's my like the Last Jedi changed a lot of things for me, and I'm like, what does this mean about the rest of Star Wars?
I would take it more as Yoda could be like, yeah, I failed. I was totally wrong. You needed to go and you needed
to save your friends.
Yeah. But
I mean, regardless here, Aang needed to save his friends because they're going to potentially be in more seasons and they need to go into the North Pole.
Yeah.
And the other thing is like, Monk Gyatso is not... He's just him, right? Like, it's the spirit of the human being, the former human being. And I think it's fair to interpret it as like him, the human being, didn't want to have like a tearful goodbye with Aang because it would like hurt him too much.
Yeah, that's what I thought. It was as much, not in a self-serving way, but as much that he didn't want to have to go through it either. I felt so sad for Aang when he came back like that.
Sure, but I felt sad for Gyatso. It's like his performance in that scene was so good, and like when Aang leaves, like you can see it on his face, like, and so we as the audience,
we know he's not
can read that and be like, oh yeah, like I understand what's going on here because like he looks so heartbroken. Yeah, and I really enjoyed that performance and what he did with that scene.
Yeah, for me, that scene was definitely one of the most important scenes, and maybe certainly of that episode, where I think it showed the extent to which like Aang was raised in such a loving environment by a kind of parent figure who just loved him unconditionally and they had a deep friendship, and the contrast between that and, you know, especially Zuko and his father, but even Sokka and his father, you know, where Sokka and Zuko both have this like wanting to like make their fathers happy, right?
Right.
And like I don't feel like Aang had that, like, because he knew he didn't have to, right?
Yeah, he never felt the need. He never felt he had to win Gyatso's approval.
Yeah, he never felt like he was ever going to be not enough as a person. Like the Aang struggle is like whether he didn't feel like he could be enough as the Avatar, right? And I think Gyatso saying like, it's not your fault. Like there's nothing you could have done. You couldn't have saved us. You just would have died with us.
That line was so powerful.
Monkey Gyatso, don't make me cry challenge failed again.
Yeah.
As soon as he showed up, I said that out loud. I was like, don't make me cry. Gyatso. I was like, no, here we go.
And because on yesterday's episode, you know, I was saying that I thought that part of the resolution with Aang and Bumi was that we were hopefully going to get less of people saying, Aang, how could you have abandoned us for so long? And you guys may have been right that maybe that more people are going to say that, but I do think that this also strengthens Aang a lot more to be able to be like, I am not carrying that guilt anymore. I feel like I've been absolved of that guilt, so that when other people say it, it's not going to make me feel as guilty, which I think is a big step forward, and it was just perfect in that scene.
Yeah, I agree. And then it could be, okay, what am I going to do now?
Right,
you know?
Exactly.
And that's what...
Exactly.
I think Admiral Zhao says to him too, right? Like, he's like, I would worry more about your future than your past.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's really the lesson, you know? It's like, you can't change your past. It's like, what are you going to do now?
Right.
And that's, you know, we'll see the rest of the series.
I also really liked... There's some questions I have about everything that happened with Roku. The ability of people to transport themselves at great speed across this world, including people riding big animals to get to islands in the middle of nowhere, is reaching Game of Thrones levels of confusion for me. But I did love everything that happened between him and Roku, particularly Roku sort of saying, kind of in contrast to Kyoshi, like, you know, you are all of us, but also I was not Kyoshi, and you're not going to be me or her. You're going to be your own person, which felt like a really good point.
Yeah, like we're all different people. We just have the same like spirit or something, right? The whole, I mean, one of the things for the whole kind of like past lives and reincarnation and all these things and spirit world that like for me, like all this like life after death stuff, like I don't dig it. Like it usually deeply bothers me in fiction. I'd say within Airbender it doesn't usually, because mostly it's just a little different. But like the idea that the avatars are different people but also the same is like kind of interesting, and I like that they underscored that. In terms of the travel, they did specifically say like we're near the border of the Fire Nation. And so maybe Roku's island is like not that far from the border to the Earth Kingdom, and also that prison. We haven't really, they haven't given us like the Indiana Jones Raiders of the Lost Ark, like the map, right? Where they show, the travel, which like I would really enjoy for what it's worth.
It was more to me like him getting there and back. I'm okay with. It was more that, as I understood it, like Jade captures him on that island.
Yes. Yeah.
So her beast like can smell all the way to the island. Fine. But like they go to the island, then brings them all the way back. Then brings all the way back to meet up with Iroh, and that's where.
So, Iroh and Zuko, and
that's where my travel comment more came from.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, it felt like a lot happened in a short period of time. There was a lot of travel involved, and
it's for me. Like I always go back to Star Trek. Like the galaxy is so big, and yet in Star Trek episodes, they can always get somewhere like within a day. And yet the Enterprise or whatever ship is the main ship on the show is the only ship in the Federation that is capable of responding to this current crisis. So it's just, it's like plot convenience, like because these are the main characters, they have to do the thing. And we don't want to have to watch like Appa. I am more understanding, I guess, because Appa is a flying beast, and so it is used to this. I don't know, like Aang being able to fly on his little glider for however long distance seems less believable. I don't know why, but
that's fair.
And he didn't go with Appa, right?
He specifically left Appa behind.
He left Appa and Momo behind. Yeah,
I thought that was very confusing. I think that's clearly just so he can get captured and they don't have to figure out what to do with them. And also, I thought he was going in the spirit world to Roku Island.
Yeah, somehow he comes out of
that would have been a better plan. Although then I guess he couldn't have grabbed the thing in the material world. It just that part felt kind of off and confusing to me. And in terms of the scope of the world, I felt like when you had 20 episodes in season 1 to journey from the south to the north, it felt epic, right? It felt like this epic, even though they're only 20-minute episodes, it felt like there's so many stops along the way that it feels like this epic journey where you're spanning the globe, right?
Yeah.
And here it feels like we've got 4 stops, right? Like there's like very few stops. I mean, I know they're going all over, but like in terms of like, here, instead of having the seasons divvied up into like the different elements, each pair of episodes that we've been discussing is like a given element. Like these 2 were fire, right? The last 2 were earth. The first 2 were air. The next 2 will presumably be water. I have mistimed my sweatshirts to be properly, coordinated. So I'm like a day ahead by accident, but it does.
I mean, I've got season 3 hair, so I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. Hotman.
They did have the cute, when Zuko and Iroh go to that bar, they did have the cute moment of, oh, hey, like we've heard stories about the Avatar. Like I heard he fought those pirates. The Canyon Guide. So for those who don't know, those are each individual episodes that take place.
Yeah.
So they're basically saying all these things happened.
Yeah.
But like we don't get to see them, basically.
Yeah. Right? Which is like I like that. Like if you're not going to have the stories, like mentioning that the stories happened, like I wouldn't mind if we had like a short conversation on top of Appa where the Sokka says something about like, oh, well, that was crazy that happened in the village or whatever.
Yeah, Totally agree there.
Yeah, they're basically Easter eggs for fans of the animated show.
But it's a nice way to layer in more of the journey,
right?
That we are missing.
It just, to me, it feels like it still feels missing. You know, it's they're basically telling us it's part of the story, but in terms of the journey, it makes the journey feel a lot shorter to me.
Yeah,
for sure. Agree.
And I do think that the collection of stories that they put all into Omashu, for me, fit better than the stories they tried to push together here. So
the official Netflix live action series Drinking Game, by the way, is every time you recognize another animated episode, you take a I don't know, a swig of water or whatever, because this should be book one water. But like it's every episode for me is like, okay, let's count how many episodes are in this episode.
Normally, basically. I will never recommend this, but if you need, like, it is Book of Water, so like light beer counts.
Sure.
I will say one point that I kept wanting to bring up in our first two episodes, and it just never quite fit, and that's fine because it's a small thing, but now I feel like it's really effective. It's really good to comment on because I think they've done a good thing with this. Every time I watched the bending, I thought, firebending, they're throwing fire, it is burning people, this is badass. Earthbending, like they're throwing rocks, they're pulling up wall. I'm going to say that, I said it really loud for some reason. They're throwing rocks, they're putting up walls, like rock shards, like this is deadly and awesome. Airbending even, like we're pushing people back dozens of feet. We're really kind of socking it to them. And Katara, God bless her, it felt like she just kept throwing buckets of water on people. Like just the way it was animated, it looked very much like water, but it just kind of looked like they were getting hit by a splash. And I love that now, and also as a way of showing how she is progressing in her abilities, now she can freeze the water. And she could do that kind of with Jet to incapacitate him last episodes. But here that she's actually able to freeze the water and then throw it as little ice shards as knives. I really like that because I could see that people were reacting as though they got hit kind of hard by something. But it always just looked a little off to me that it just looked like they were just getting splashed with water.
I never felt that way. I could see that. I like that they're describing how her skills are advancing. I do feel one of the things with the pacing here is I don't feel that kind of like through line of training and constantly, like, I feel like it's referenced more than shown, and maybe that's just the demands of a 8-episode live action series, but I would like to see more of that and more of the training, I mean, we did get some Azula training,
and by this point Aang should be waterbending, right?
I mean, in the animated series, he is. Right? He's trying to learn. He's trying to get Katara to teach him, and then they're going to the Northern Water Tribe for him to learn. Here, have they mentioned that like he's going there to learn, or is it just they're trying to prevent some?
No, they're going there to help those people.
Right, he had the vision or whatever.
Yeah, which to me feels right. Kyoshi told him, I think.
Yeah.
Right, and I feel like that. I want that to be, to me, that is central to the story, is the idea of training, is the idea of having a skill or a skill set that you're trying to acquire, and that's like the big journey really in the story to me, both for Aang and for Katara. And I love how in the animated series we really get to see both of their journeys, and then later some other characters as well, right? And I feel like we're getting a little bit of that, but less than I'd like, and it doesn't feel central in the way it does to me in the animated series.
Yeah, and in general, like in stories like this, I dislike when people are led to their next destination by like mystical visions. So yes, I agree that the purpose of going to the Northern Water Tribe for Aang to train as the Avatar in waterbending, like it seems to be like a missing element here. Element.
I think it's fair. What do we all think of Zuko in this? Because he obviously had some big plot development.
A+. Give me all the Zuko.
Yeah, I feel like, I think The acting's been amazing. I think he's had some of the better writing in the series, like some of the better lines to deliver. I think it's interesting how they really are making him the driving force of kind of a lot of what's going, like, of his own. It's not really a transformation. Like, I don't see him having a redemption arc here. And I have a whole spiel that I won't go into about how I don't really like believe in the idea of redemption and blah, 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 blah. But like I went for a walk and I like was talking it in my head and I'm like, you know what? I'll spare you that. But like I mean, cause I used the word redemption arc in the lead up thing. Right. But I feel like they're setting him up as such a sympathetic character already that I do kind of wonder like what the payoff is going to feel like, because I feel like he doesn't have that far to go. Like, he did have that explosive moment with Aang where he's like, you know, my father's a great man. And then he literally quoted him and they, you know, cut to the backstory where he basically gets that line out of his dad's mouth. And this is something that I feel like I feel a sense of loss that it's not the same as the animated series, but like we still have that. I feel like here they are trying to do something interesting and different with the character and with the character of Ozai, because there's something in that Agni Kai that I felt like I picked up on that was either there or it wasn't there. Either I imagined it or it was deliberately, you know, evoked by Daniel Day Kim. But like, I felt like when Ozai was punishing Zuko and like branding him, I felt like he didn't want to. I didn't feel like that was an act of malice. I felt like it was a misguided act of thinking he was doing what he needed to do as a father to toughen up his son, because his father had presumably treated him that way, and his father's father had treated his father. And it's, to me, that actually really underscores in a beautiful way the way somebody has to break the cycle of violence, somebody has to break the cycle of abuse, right?
Yes.
And Zuko is so abused by his father, but it feels like his father was clearly abused by his father, and that it went down like this.
I agree. And I felt one of the reasons I love this episode so much, these episodes, is I felt like this is when I finally got what they're doing with Zuko and with Azula and with Ozai. Because first of all, we talked about that maybe they were rushing Zuko's story a little bit much. And here I felt like it actually really makes sense that, like, in that moment, yes, he went for Iroh instead of the Avatar, but it's not because he has realized like the Avatar quest is hopeless or anything like that. He's still just as much on it. And to me, that really gets to how conflicted this guy is. And that to some extent, it's that how important his uncle is to him, but also that maybe he thinks he can't get the Avatar without his uncle, you know? And so it's still this kind of mixed place. And I think there's something to be said for when the first time you hear a story, a big part of the power of it is that you go on a journey with a character and then there's big reveals towards the end. When you retell that story, you have to decide, are you telling it for an entirely new audience? Or are you telling it for the audience who's already seen that version of the story? And it feels like here they've made a conscious choice of, instead of saying, we're going to make you feel negative towards Zuko because he's the antagonist and then slowly let you have sympathy for him, that here we're really going to make you have sympathy right out of the gate for Zuko and now for Azula. Because by the end of this episode, I also felt kind of sympathy for Azula, because what it really feels to me like is, yes, that Ozai did not, in the animated version, it feels like Ozai gives up on Zuko entirely, wants him to go away forever, and now Azula is the heir.
Right. Yeah.
This, it feels like he is very intentionally it's very Sith in a way. He wants to toughen up both Zuko and Azula and play them off against each other so that they will both be as callous and hard and, unmerciful, so that one of them will emerge victorious and be the rightful heir to him. And in that, if that's where they're going, I think now it makes sense to me why they're bringing in Azula so quick, why they're doing some of the other stuff. It's not the story I love, but maybe because we got that story, this is a new way to do it.
Yeah, I can see all that, except for like sympathy for Azula. Like, I feel like she's malicious. Like, she is like evil, and that it doesn't feel to me like this. She's been abused, and she's like, I feel like there was this like she was enjoying watching Zuko suffer, you know, and also like when she brought those like rebels in to get, you know, immolated, like that, there's this pleasure, this malice, this sadism that, I mean, yeah, obviously she also had a father who's, you know, a horrible person, at least in terms of what his acts are, right? But like I feel like where she is now, I feel like she has farther to go. I understand the kind of like, maybe I'd say I could co-sign the word empathy, and I'm not saying you shouldn't feel sympathy, but like I would say maybe some like I feel where she's coming from, but like I definitely feel like some very, very negative, like maybe more than Ozai. Like whatever Ozai thinks he's supposed to be, like Azula is that, you know, which maybe Azulan was, and
to me, it's sort of like if you look at a child soldier who is just vicious and brutal, do you focus on the evil? Like, are you like, oh, this child soldier is evil? Or are you like, this is a child who was raised in an incredibly evil situation? Like, do I want Azula to roam free? Hell no.
Right.
But I think all of that is true, but I think she and Zuko are very much both products of their father's raising. And I have more, like, I want him to win in the fight between the two of them.
Yeah.
But I also have some sympathy towards her in terms of like, you have been taught that being this horrible person is what is the right thing to do. And you probably feel like you're winning because you're getting your father's love. But then like the way that her father turns on her very quickly and is like, don't think Zuko's out of the running. Like, and you know, you being a candy, like, you know, kiss ass, like that's just as bad. And
I just feel like the malice is like something almost like innate, like is how it feels to me. You know, like it feels different, I guess.
Yeah.
But I don't know. We'll see.
Animated Azula, the first word that comes to my mind is psychopath.
Right. Yeah.
And in this one, so far, like they're introducing her earlier and like showing more of what's been going on in the Fire Nation. She seems more cunning and manipulative than I recall Azula being.
I feel like she was cunning and manipulative in the but like more in a like overtly threatening kind of way.
Yeah.
Well, to me, like the way she, I don't want to spoil too much, but the way she takes over a certain group in the end of season 2. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But here it is, she's like playing politics with the military and the government in a way that
like her being involved in the promotion of Zhao.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But I'd say at least, does her being in it so early now make more sense to you guys? Because to me, I now feel like if they were going to tell the exact story they told originally, there's no reason for her to be on screen. But I feel like I now understand the story they're wanting to tell with her instead.
I feel like if you want to tell as much of the Iroh and Zuko backstory, like what happens before the present day events, essentially before the main story, then it makes sense to have more Ozai and more Azula. I think that makes sense for context.
Yeah.
So it to me, it does feel like it goes along with the choice of telling a different Iroh and Zuko story. Right. So I feel like that all fits together. Yes.
Yeah. Well, and then on some level, sorry, go ahead. You go ahead.
Well, my answer is no or not enough. Like, if they're going to give us this much, I think they should give us more and be drawing like more of a narrative through line between what Iroh is telling Zuko and then showing what Ozai is doing with Azula. Right? Because like Zuko has this image of his father and the Fire Nation, and like, I just want to get back, restore my honor, etc. And Iroh keeps telling him, like, no, like, you're wrong. Like, it's not that great back there. And we're getting a little of it, but I think maybe if they showed us more, even more of it, is perhaps what I'm wanting.
It does seem ironic to me that in a way I feel like this version of Ozai I think you were kind of saying this earlier, cares more about his son than he does in the animation. Because to me in animation, he's written off his
but
he's written off his son entirely. It's like, no, you challenged me once, you're done.
Right.
Whereas here it's much more like, I want you to learn this lesson because I do want you to be strong enough to
right, like he wants Zuko to be his heir.
Right.
Whereas in the original series, it's like he's accepted that Azula is his heir and Zuko is his like screw up son, like his brother in his eyes, right? That the two of them are the disgraced kind of, they can go off and scour the earth on some hopeless quest.
Yeah.
And he genuinely seems to respect how Zuko found the Avatar. Like the fact that he corrects Azula when she says Commander Zhao found the Avatar. He makes a point of saying, no, it was Zuko.
Yeah. And I do think that there's some kind of pitting the two of them against each other there, but there's also just a genuine, like, no, I gave Zuko an impossible task and he succeeded.
Yeah.
And then in the next episode, we see Aang talking to Zuko about basically like, hey, you like did all this research on avatars, like you collected all this information so it's clear that like Zuko took the challenge like really seriously. He wasn't just like, running his boat around hoping that he'd find a sky beam somewhere.
Yeah.
Like one thing I was thinking about that I don't think has been said ever in either the animated or the live action, but at least fits in my mind. I think that the fire, it always seemed like a huge coincidence that Zuko just happened to be in the area of the entire world where Aang gets defrosted. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized they may well think that the Avatar died as part of the attack on the Air Nomad Temple, which means the next Avatar should be in the Water Tribe. And so, like him being specifically in the Water Tribe area makes a lot more sense then.
Yeah. I mean, or he thought that he was somehow found out that he was probably of the Southern Air Temple, and then looking.
That's true too.
But that would also like explain why they were looking for all the waterbenders.
Oh yeah, that's true too.
Yeah. And in this one, I guess like Katara got her mom killed. Like what?
Oh, okay. So let's talk about the parentage of Sokka and Katara, because, and here I wonder if again I'm going to be off on my own, or if this is, Paul, the kind of thing you were talking about show not tell. In the show, we know and we feel the incredible pain that Katara went through because of the death of her mother. We never actually see that happen on screen. And we certainly don't see that Katara is in any way responsible or like that was the one being protected specifically.
Yeah.
Similarly, we know that Sokka feels this incredible pressure to live up to the example that his dad set. And in the original, as we commented on in our review, in our look back at the animated, one of the nice things is that they never actually make Hokada, Sokka's father. Hakoda, thank you. That they never make Hakoda like actually this like bad guy who like ran out on his family or who like made Sokka feel terrible. It's just that the situation made Sokka feel terrible.
Right.
And so having each of them have these horrible memories, one that's of events we knew about, but just made so much worse and shown on screen. And the other being of like, actually, Sokka has even more of a reason to feel bad. I feel like the animated was much more subtle and trusted its audience a lot more. And this was much more like, no, we have to make it like the exact thing that, would fit this bill.
I felt hit over the head with it. For sure. I will say that I'll give them an out, which they may or may not maintain as the series goes on. But those were things that were showed to them by, you know, the spirit.
Mm-hmm.
Do we know that that's exactly how things happened?
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
Kind of like a reverse Black Mercy.
Right.
Like
Yeah.
DC
Yeah.
Comics
Exactly.
thing of like showing you like what you want most, like showing you your deepest fear.
Yeah.
And yeah, like that those events may have happened, but not played out in exactly that way. And this is an exaggeration.
I was hoping that, but at some point the spirit says to Aang, they're trapped in their darkest memories, which to me meant it was that it is specifically their memory, not like their own like fear interpretation that like makes their memories 20% worse or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think that leaves open the potential for an unreliable narrator, basically, where the spirit is telling that to Aang. Do we know the spirit's honest? Like, I think you're probably correct, or I think the interpretation that you're giving, I think is probably what the writers had intended. I think that's the most likely thing. I do think right now, as of what's been on screen, it is open to interpretation. Like I said, it's possible that future events will close the room for that interpretation by adding, you know, by there being more explicit, like reinforcement of what happened, you know, and assuming that it is actually exactly what happened as we saw on screen, I don't like it that much, you know. I wouldn't say I hate it, but like it feels
It's a weird interpretation of the show not tell thing.
Yeah.
Which is like it's not a truism in storytelling. And I think the problem is that when you say show not tell, it doesn't necessarily mean you have to show a full flashback scene. It just means like don't have the character say, I'm really sad because my mom died. Was killed by firebenders, right? Like you want to show the emotion through a scene in the current story.
Yeah, and I think there's just a constant kind of stating of one's emotions or telling someone else about their emotions and how they should deal with them. That just is it. I feel like it doesn't leave enough room for the actors to kind of give nuance, and I think Zuko's one of the characters where they've succeeded the most with that, because he doesn't always say a lot, you know. I think a lot of the times the less dialogue there is, and especially when you have live action people portraying the roles, that's one of the big advantages over animation, really, is that animated faces can be expressive, but it is very, very difficult for them to be as expressive and as nuanced in that expression as a human face of like a skilled actor, right?
Especially in combination with the dialogue.
Yes.
Yeah. And I would say, like, we forget this show is what, 15 years old, 20 years old, and animation.
The first season, I think, was about 20.
Yeah, animation. Like, I would say that like what you just said, I think, isn't necessarily true about the facial expressions in Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. But that's also because that has much more advanced technology and a budget that's probably 100 times bigger to use that technology. I still think your general point of a human face can convey emotion better than a drawing of human face is absolutely true. I'm just saying that I think that like with this show, not only is that true, but also this is without the budget and without the technology that we're getting used to in shows today.
Yeah, I think I think more than like budget or technology, it's about stylistic choice. Like it is animation of like it's cartoon drawing, right? In a certain way, it's the faces, the drawings are representations of what they are, as opposed to I mean, the Spider-Verse movies have very different styles of animation within them, and some of them are the kind of more hyper realism, and some of them are very like more
Spider Noir is not giving them
exactly, and so it is certainly possible. Personally, I still feel like most kind of more photoreal kind of animation still feels a little bit of that kind of uncanny valley to me a lot of the time, but certainly you are right that there are ways of animating that you can give a little bit more, but still, I just feel like it's almost never going to be as much as like, not even just in terms of whether you can visually represent it, but like the feeling that a person has. I think the reason a lot of people prefer live action is the feeling they get of looking at real people, you know, the faces of real people specifically.
And I think that gets to the point of why it was so specific that we felt this way. And here's kind of my own spin on show don't tell. I think that the problem here is that what we're in the end, what we're supposed to see is not the exact way that their mother died. It's Katara's reaction to it and her feelings about it. And so for us to see, we can either see how she's feeling about it, or we can be told exactly what happened.
Right.
So that now we can think, oh, well, of course, so Katara must feel this.
Right.
And in the same way. And I do agree with you, that's an out. Like, I think if you give me 2 minutes of Katara and Sokka talking about the things they were most afraid of, and, you know, Katara, like, there are times where I've had fights with people where in my head, I know I got too angry, and in my head, I'm thinking about all the worst thoughts I say when I'm angry, and I'll go to the person later and be like, I'm so sorry, and like, when I said this specific thing, and they're like, no, you never said that. Like, so I can imagine, like, it's entirely possible that Sokka never actually heard what his father was saying, but he thought he didn't do well enough. Maybe some of the other kids teased him. And so maybe in his head, he remembers that his father said that. And if him and Katara have that conversation, and he's like, no, Katara, mom died, you know, doing this other thing. And she's like, no, Sokka, you know, dad never said that. Like, that would be all I need. Because then I think it's much more what you're talking about. But we'll see.
I feel like I don't want that either, but if it made me happy, I'd be like, okay, I'm glad Matthew's happy.
I'm saying it's a way to confirm the out that you're giving it.
Sure.
I still wish they just hadn't done it. Like,
yeah, for sure.
Well, yeah, the whole Ko, the face stealer, in the original story, that comes a little later, and it's only Aang who goes into the spirit world and meets Ko.
Right.
And in fact, like this episode, the panda, badger, skunk spirit, whatever it is, like that was completely different.
Yeah.
Right? Because by the end of this episode, Aang is supposed to have soothed that spirit, and it returns to its kind of more natural, less angry form. And that just didn't happen here.
He gave him like an acorn though.
Yeah.
But yeah, I feel like that payoff wasn't there, right? That was like, I thought that was like the main point of like these 2 episodes. Was
right, and then we kind of swerved into Ko.
Yeah. And and it was just, it felt like, to me, about twice as many stories as needed to be in one episode, or 2 episodes for that matter. But I would have liked more payoff on the forest as well, and the spirit of the forest.
Yeah, I felt weird because on the one hand, I wanted fewer stories, but I'm wondering if either of you felt this way. I thought at first that we were going to get the Painted Lady when we got to this town that was like having all these spirit problems and other problems. And I thought maybe we're going to get to have that part of Katara's journey, which
that's much later.
But you thought they were going to put it in earlier, basically.
Yeah. Was that in season 2? I thought that was season 1.
I think it's season 3.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Never mind. That's fine then.
So the edition that I really liked was the 41st Division.
Oh, yeah.
Edition. Right? Because that, the War Council scene, the Agni Kai, like that all exists. But the fact that the 41st Division was assigned to Zuko's mission, and that like the way that it's revealed to them and the respect that they show, like that played out much better. In the animated show, I think like Iroh just tells the story, and it could be implied or it could have been planned and just cut out, but they never say that they're the 41st Division in the animated show. Yeah. So the revelation of that was more powerful here, or was powerful, and the respect that they show to Zuko makes much more sense. And there, like the show don't tell, right? Like none of them say anything like "Thank you for saving our lives, Prince Zuko." Yeah. I guess they do call him our prince. Our prince.
He says our prince.
So like that, and just like the bows, the respectful bows as he walks past them, like that was great. That was perfect. I love that scene.
Especially because I don't know if this was intentional or if I'm just misreading it or something. When we make it that specific, part of what that also means is that the argument that Zuko was making in that war council wound up like being what they did. They didn't attack with the 41st. And I don't know if that means that the same attack happened with a different group, or if on some level it's also that the father like is actually like, no, you made a good point, but you did it in the wrong way, and so I'm punishing you, but I'm actually doing what you suggested
like
they
didn't actually follow through with the plan.
Right.
That's a really good point. I didn't even think about that. It's like, yeah. I mean, maybe he was just like, we won't even attack. I got to punish my son.
Yeah.
We'll get back to our military conquest later.
The only thing I didn't like about that was the way it was framed was, Zuko treats us really badly as our commanding officer, and Zhao doesn't. And then it was like Iroh being like, well, yeah, but forget about how badly he treats you because, he did this really nice thing for you before.
Right.
And granted, I'm a labor rights guy, like I'm all for the unionized workers. Like it felt a little dismissive. I wish that that it had been framed more as, we think Zuko's going to get us all killed. Zhao is the way we're actually going to get to go home. Like that was much more about that rather than specifically about like Zuko treats us badly, because there's been nothing done to make Zuko treat them any better.
Right. Zuko hasn't actually learned like to not be a tool. Like he's still a tool to them, right? He saved their lives, and then maybe there's some element of resentment, right? Like I got scarred and off on this ridiculous quest because I stood up for you guys and saved your lives,
Right.
So maybe that's like an element there, but I agree that like he's still not a good commanding officer. Although they don't really know much about whether Zhao's a good commanding officer or not. It's like, oh, this is the new guy. He hasn't been a tool to me yet. And I don't know about you. Like,
and there's an extent to which like Zuko and Iroh are asking them to risk all their lives again, because they are now all in mutiny against a direct order from the Fire Lord. And so they're sort of all putting themselves on the line.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, for me, this, like Zuko's story, we're going to get to redemption in the future, but this story that's going on here in this episode is about him like growing as a leader, I guess. And yeah, you can say like, well, he's just kind of been a dick to them. But I think, Paul, you said something about like he resents them, right?
Well, like, I'm just saying that's possible.
Yeah, like Ozai, the way Ozai presents this is like more of your punishment. As more of your punishment, I'm going to saddle you with these new recruits, whose lives you valued so much. And so, like there might be a bit of resentment from Zuko that like he's in this position because he valued their lives. Right. And he doesn't, because he's so young, like he doesn't see yet the value of that as a leader.
Yeah.
Especially a military leader, right? Like, and so far, like he has like, every time I think Lieutenant G like says something like, we found the Avatar, like we have a rumor, like I'll send some men. Zuko's like, no, I'm going with Iroh.
Right.
Which is kind of his like lack of trust.
Right.
And I think what has been broken through here in this episode is that now there is a respect and a trust between them. And maybe there's still enough time, like we'll get to see something come out of that, like a positive development out of that. Yeah. So like I really like the way that this whole thing with the 41st and Lieutenant G is played out. And then Iroh too, like Iroh, like I continue to praise the Iroh performance, especially in the background. Like Iroh standing in the background, like I always pay attention to, because he'll have like a nod or a facial expression or something, like a look that passes between him and another character, and it's just great.
For sure. Yeah, like seeing him at the Agni Kai was painful.
Oh, yeah.
Because he clearly thought it was horrible and abusive, but also felt like he didn't really have the stand, like there was only so much he could do, kind of. you know,
Yeah.
and I mean, he tried to step in, but it's like he can't tell his brother what to do because his brother's the Fire Lord now. And yeah, what did you think about the voiceover, like the monologue, the Iroh monologue in episode 6?
That's okay.
Yeah, powerful, but a bit on the nose.
Yeah, that's kind of how I felt. I felt like I don't feel like there was a better way of delivering these words, but I'm not totally sure why they're here. You know, it felt a little bit to me almost like the writers not trusting their episode, like for the audience, maybe, you know?
Yeah, like it was an attempt to tie all of the stories together.
Yeah, like if there was some kind of like, I don't know, like How I Met Your Mother aspect to it, where like he was talking to someone, it just felt a little weird to me that he was like, all of a sudden talking to us. Yeah, sure. I was just kind of like, why are we hearing Iroh's voice in voiceover for all this time? I guess
they've done that with
telling G the story. Is that what that was?
I don't think so.
I feel like that would have made sense. That's how I would have spun it.
Yeah,
if I were gonna, you know what I mean? That's how.
But yeah, it did feel to me like it was kind of like they were trying to make Iroh sort of the narrator of this whole thing. But that's weird because they've made him even more of a subjective character than he is in the original.
Right. So, yeah, for sure.
They did it with Gyatso as well. Like in a previous episode, I think there was like Gyatso voiceover.
Yeah.
Narration.
Yeah, and there was, I guess there was, I think Kyoshi, like the intro or something with the earth, air, water, fire.
Yeah.
I don't know.
That's something maybe to pay attention to on a rewatch.
I think so, yeah.
Is the voiceovers, like if they're doing something where like each one represents a character.
Yeah. I'm just going to interject with something completely unrelated, except about voiceover, that I've been really enjoying Only Murders in the Building, partially because it has different characters doing voiceovers at different point, because it's a podcast. And like, it just as you know, doing podcasting and then like, you know, having thoughts about narration in film where like most of the time it only really works for me, like in film noir. But like you can, you know, the intro to the animated series really works. Like there is like at the beginning of every episode, it's like, we're going to give you the whole framing of the series right here with Katara just telling you this. And like here they've kind of tried to do a few different things with it. And it hasn't felt super congruous to me, but honestly, I'm actually really looking forward to rewatching the series as much as I didn't enjoy certain choices early on. I do feel like getting to the end of this season and then understanding what they were going for, rewatching the whole season through that lens of like kind of understanding the story that they want to tell. I do want to see how different it feels. Because like I deliberately didn't rewatch the original animated series because I didn't want to be constantly comparing everything. Mm-hmm. Yet I find myself constantly comparing. Like I just can't help it, you know?
Yeah.
But once I've seen a whole chunk of it, then rewatching it with itself as its own frame of reference instead of the animated series, I do wonder how different that experience is going to be.
Yeah, I think it's true. I mean, I certainly feel like even just with what we've learned so far, it makes me feel like I like the first episodes more, you know, knowing what they're going for. Mm-hmm. I don't think I'm ever going to think that first scene was necessary, but
they'll be very different things because I already, like, we did rewatch it before starting this. Mm-hmm. And in the animated show, like the Canyon Guide episode, which they just like reference in the bar scene, like already was a pretty like low filler episode for me. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So for them cutting it out here and being like, yeah, that happened. Like,
right. Yeah.
This is a pretty skippable episode.
I mean, I feel like season 1 certainly had more of any of that than season 2 or 3. You know, and was some would say of uneven quality, some would say just like not as good, some would say just like if you don't have Toph and Azula, like it's just not going to be as good yet, you know, like but
wait, who?
I mean,
right. Kidding.
I think I like season 1 more than most people do, but I definitely feel like there's a lot of episodes to me, but like that kind of episode to me feels like it's not so much the experience of that episode on its own. It's the feeling that there have been a bunch of, you know, quote unquote filler episodes, but like episodic episodes that makes it feel like this journey to the North Pole, to the Northern Water Tribe, feels like, oh, we're here finally, you know? Yeah. Whereas like now I'm kind of like, oh, we're already here, you know?
Yeah, no.
Like, that was fast.
And part of that, I think, is that it's a shorter amount of episodes, but part of it's also because, you know, we're watching it over 3 days, and maybe we're watching it over a full day, you know, instead of like week to week or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, I watched the original one, like the whole series in like a week, so
that's
the
fair.
first season was like 2 or 3
very
days.
bingeable.
It is.
I'll also say, and this is kind of a general comment about fandom, but I think to me, this is really proving it. This, I think they're doing a very good job, especially in like those little reminders, like, oh yeah, the canyon adventure we went on. This to me is blowing the water out of the idea of like, oh, this new version ruined my childhood, or they forever ruined the show. Like, they're very clearly doing this in a like, no, we're doing something different. And like, I imagine that the viewership of the Canyon episode, for example, went up a little bit because some people did watch that scene and go, oh yeah, that was a really cool episode. I liked that. I'm going to pause this and go back and watch it, you know? Because you can, you know, because this is not erasing any of that stuff. And at any point, someone who can say, yeah, this isn't the version I love, I can just go back and watch that version. We have that already.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That phrase, like, this new thing has ruined my childhood, right? You know what ruined my childhood? Knight Rider.
I love Knight Rider.
Like,
oh man, I had.
Have you watched it, Paul? It was on Netflix last year, and I tried to rewatch it. Yeah. It's terrible. It is an absolutely terrible show. It's like
super
the misogyny of the character Michael Knight. Like, this is all an aside. So we all have, but what I'm trying to say is we all have these fond memories of things from our childhood. Just like live with that. And some of the stuff is rewatchable, some isn't. But I don't like nothing new is gonna like if they made a new Knight Rider and it was bad, I'm not gonna be like, this ruined Knight Rider for me. Like, Knight Rider's already bad. So if you love Avatar, the original Avatar, love that. And like we already had this ruined it for us. Like the live action movie in theory like ruined it, quotes, air quotes, right?
That's true.
But it didn't. Like, you can just watch the animated show and it's still great.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'll make a distinction between something like a remake and something that supposedly shares canon with something where I've had to do a certain amount of mental work to like be able to watch something that's supposed to take place within the same framework as something else and be like, yeah, that's not part of my headcanon. Like I'm excising that, which, you know, certainly with Star Wars, I'm kind of separating certain things, but like the last 2 seasons of Dexter or like, there's another show. I don't even want to mention it, but like I loved the first 2 seasons. The last 2, I was like, you have ruined this show for me. Yeah. But then like, yeah, I guess I could still rewatch the first or second, you know? But
there's a movie that I think 95% of it is the best war movie I've ever seen.
Oh, yeah.
And the last few minutes are some of the most manipulative, offensive
and you can just not watch those minutes and be like...
I now know exactly when to hit pause to stop watching something about saving a private.
Yeah.
All right, back to Avatar.
Okay, I was going to move to a new topic, but go ahead.
Okay. At the beginning of one of these episodes, they're riding on Appa, and they comment about like a past adventure, which is that firebenders attacked them because Sokka was flirting with a woman who ended up being a Fire Nation soldier.
Right.
That never happened in the animated show, right? Like that's not a reference to an episode as far as I know. And I kind of hated that because it's like, well, what about Suki?
I think they're softening the see, I honestly think because episode 2 and maybe some things that haven't happened yet are not that separated by a large number of events, they're trying to insert an event that makes it feel like those things will be more separated.
Yes.
So they're planting the seed of Sokka as a player.
Yes.
Essentially.
Yes.
I wouldn't even say as a player, I would say as a 15-year-old boy.
Yeah.
You know,
sure.
I was 15 and I fell in love with a new person every 3 months. And well, I was actually a player, so never mind.
Yeah, I was gonna say I was 15 and I didn't. So
no, like, I'm not saying that either of us is ever, but I'm saying like I do.
I was 15 and I pined for the same girl for like 3 years. So I need that out of you, Sokka.
I'm just saying that like
different people are different, and Sokka's not.
And the way his situation was, like, if he was like, "Oh yeah, I'm going to be back with Suki in 3 months," then yes, I feel like that feels different. But I think the way that was set up is that was like a beautiful moment at summer camp that the two of them had, and have no expectation of ever seeing each other again.
Right. It's weird to me because it feels like I just don't have the feeling of a lot of time passing.
Yeah.
You know, and
it's show don't tell. They're telling you that time. Yeah,
they're telling you that time has passed, and you can tell someone something and then reinforce it with some things that give you that feel. And I feel like they've done the tell without then also showing some of the, like, I don't need a montage, you know, but I need, like, I don't know, maybe a change in terrain, or like, I don't know, give me a montage.
I was just about to say, I would like a montage.
Yeah, I take it back.
I just rewatched the training movies, which pretty much, I just rewatched all the Rocky movies, which pretty much invented the modern concept of the training montage, you know? Like,
montages get panned, but if you do them right, they are effective in what you need them to do, which is show the passage of time.
Yeah. The problem with a montage is when you do a montage instead of actually giving any of a critical piece of content. Like when you're trying to show two people falling in love and you like never show them talking to each other, you just show them doing this and that in just kind of like meaningless things.
Buying bread together at a farmer's market is the most loving thing you can do in a relationship, Paul.
Sure, but
like
I just want to hear them talk about whether it's sourdough or like whole wheat. Like, you know,
I'll give you an example from
dialogue.
I'll give you an example from a movie that most of our listeners have probably never watched. So this is probably an incredibly unhelpful example, but I think the actor playing Commander Zhao, one of the first things that I saw him in that Paul had reminded me of was in the great movie called Keeping the Faith, where he played a karaoke singer. And he played a karaoke salesman. And it did make me really wish that part of the celebration at the end of, you know, when he's captured the Avatar, that he was going to sing, because he's got a very distinctive and wonderfully bad singing voice. But putting that aside,
at least in that role,
that movie, Keeping the Faith, is, I think, my favorite rom-com of all time. It is, among other things, an utter love letter to New York. Very much so in that it kind of like makes fun of people who aren't from New York City, which is wonderful. But I love all New Yorker.
I feel you.
You get it. Yeah. But in it, they show two characters falling in love and show you 3 different incredibly romantic scenes of them connecting, and then show you a montage of their relationship blossoming from their first night together into them seriously dating a couple of months later. And to me, it's a perfect example, because I love the montage and it's set to a wonderful song. But if you didn't have those 3 scenes at the beginning of it, which is kind of what Paul is saying, it wouldn't work at all. So give us a full training scene and then show us like more of that happening, you know, give us a full, you know, give us like a good adventure they have, and then show us like 3 or more times of Aang in a city helping people doing something and Sokka doing something silly in the background.
Exactly. You know? Give the montage, but don't skip the thing that the montage is basically saying, hey, a bunch of things like this happened.
Yeah.
And what you could do, like in one of those montage scenes of like escaping Fire Nation soldiers, is show like the cabbage guy again.
Yes.
And like show him screaming. Like do it that way.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I want to shift gears and talk about a different part of the episodes. in part because we got some feedback about this. So we got an email from, again, I love the names you all come up with. This one is from John Cena at gmail.com.
What?
Which is wonderful.
Is he saying that John Cena doesn't know?
He's saying that John Cena is Jon Snow, right? No?
Yeah, it's a reference to Jon Snow. This is John Cena.
All right. I never watched that show, so.
That's fair.
I didn't really watch much either.
So they write, first time listening to the podcast, but I'm loving your Avatar coverage. Thank you so much. Looking forward to what else you cover. I was so psyched to see the blue spirit! Exclamation point!
Ooh,
oh,
okay.
I had seen this I had already seen this when I listened to your coverage of episodes 3 and 4. And when you talked about Aang asserting that it's okay to stay a child, I kept thinking of how he treats Zuko in these episodes. He doesn't see him as an enemy. He really wants to be his friend. In a way, I think many of us adults, quote unquote, learn not to do, and maybe the kids are right. What do you think? Love the coverage. Thanks. YKNJC.
Word. Yeah, I really enjoyed how Aang just like treated Zuko like a person.
Yeah.
You know, after Zuko rescued him and then he rescued Zuko and then he just talks to him, you know. He's like, I have to ask you a serious question. You know, what kind of calligraphy brush do you use?
Yeah.
And then like they just talk to each other like people. And then like Zuko remembers to be angry, you know.
Yeah.
But like he disarms him for a little bit and then, you know, and then he disarms him again with the, you know, the airbending makes the fire just go up in smoke and then the boat drift off and, you know, that's it. But I always, that was the moment in the original show when I kind of realized sort of who Zuko was and like maybe who he was going to be.
Yeah.
You know, and here I feel like they gave us a lot more of that before then. You know, I mean, there were signs in the first show to kind of make him a little sympathetic, right? But not quite to this extent where like, you know, and it's still kind of self-serving, like, because he's like, no, I don't want Zhao to rescue him. I want to capture him. I want to be the one who captures him. But like, it's clear that there's, you know, I think on the one hand, in the animated show, that scene is like kind of more subtle in some ways. Because I don't think they talk. I think like Zuko's like unconscious or something, you know?
It takes place later, right? Like this is a mashup. Like the Blue Spirit rescue.
Sort of later. I mean, it's late in season 1.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're late in season 1, you know?
Well, no, but
it doesn't feel like it because
it happens when they get it is literally in the last because it's when they get to the place that we're going to in season 1. It happens at the North Pole. Yeah.
What happens in the animated show is that Zuko succeeds in kidnapping Aang when he is in the spirit world. That's when the Ko stuff happens.
Oh, right. Yeah.
So he takes his body while it is his soul is in the spirit world.
Yeah.
And then like Aang reconnects with his body and they're in like an ice cave and they have this conversation essentially.
Right. No, but I'm talking about the rescue. There's a scene before that. Yeah, where they don't have a conversation.
The Blue Spirit rescue, does happen. Yeah. So like they've kind of meshed those two together.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I was referring to like the first time, not when they have the conversation, but like when it's like a one-sided conversation, when Aang's just kind of talking to unconscious Zuko, like, you know, basically like maybe we could have been friends if you know if we were born in a different time, kind of. But here, this was like a more direct sort of instance of that, which is more like when they're in the cave. But yeah, I found it effective. You know, I that was aside from like when he's with Gyatso, like that was some of the Aang I've enjoyed the most. You know,
and I definitely felt like as a our John Cena loving or disparaging friend, depending on how you want to read it. I think you're right that like this is set up perfectly by Boomy saying like you're a child and angrily owning that, being like, and I'm not going to change, you know?
Right. Yeah, exactly. Like I'm going to, you know, I mean, there's like a saying like empty your cup. Right. And like, I think Aang has a very empty cup a lot of the time where he's willing to take people as they are and doesn't have a lot of preconceptions and doesn't see why things can't be a way that nobody else thinks they can be, just because that's not how they are. Like, it's like, why not? You know, and
well, it's very much that concept of look to the future, not the past, because not only for yourself, but also like, Zuko has tried to attack me in the past, but I want to know what will Zuko do in the future and how can I influence that?
Yeah.
And it's a good reminder that Zuko is also a child, you know, a teenager still, like not an adult, not fully an adult. And it was nice to see that moment from him. But it was also nice to see him revert to form.
Right, yeah.
Because I think said earlier, like Zuko's performance, Dallas's performance, not just with dialogue, but just like his facial expressions of his anger, is really effective for me. Yeah. And it's such an essential, his anger is such an essential part of his character. And to be able to express that, not just with words or even like with yells, but just with a glare is lovely to see.
For sure. And that mixed with like the inner conflict and the yells, though, we did get one really good Zuko, like, you know, I was like, oh, there it is.
Yeah, you're right. I think it was when on the ship, right, with Iroh.
Yeah.
Where Iroh's like trying to tell him something like that he needs to do or not do. And he's just like, ah.
Yeah.
Love it. But he's able to convey that same emotion also just with a look. And he and Ken Leung continue to be Zhao, which the different characters are pronouncing it different ways, but I guess I'll mostly say Zhao because that's how the character himself is saying his name.
Yeah.
But they continue to be like my two top performances of just like really standout performances.
Yeah. The Zhao like writing his speech stuff.
Oh yes.
Was so good. And it's just like so slimy.
Yeah, it really is. Now,
don't write that down.
I don't want to focus on this for too long. We haven't talked about it at all yet because I don't think it's really come up. But can we agree that if you are standing at the top of a tall wall, like a fairly high up wall, and a gust of air quite like concussively hits you and knocks you off that wall, that the chance of lethality happening upon your reaching the ground is not insignificant?
Nope. I watched that scene and I was like, oh, Matthew. Like, seriously, that was my first reaction.
You know I was going to go there.
Thought. But then
Zuko's carving people up with those blades. Like, that's not arguable, I don't think.
No, it is. I think it's mostly weapon on weapon. And it's comic book violence. And
I know.
My wife turned to me and was like, she was like, well, that's got to kill some people, right? I'm like, no, it doesn't. Like, I understand physics in the world that we inhabit, and I understand physics in the world that they inhabit, and I understand that those are not the same physicses or biologies. Science just doesn't work the same in those worlds. And yes, falling off of something that high in our world is not a good idea. And if you knock someone off of something like that, you might kill them. In their world,
the gust of wind,
not what happens.
The gust of wind will cushion their fall.
Exactly. It'll like a pillow. It'll lift them up just before they might get
because they're lifted up by the wind, and then like the wind is carrying them. Like they'll still fall hard. But that's that's my logic.
All I know is in the Spider-Man video game, which is awesome, you are constantly knocking bad guys off of roofs, and then the camera is making sure that you see that the guy is like webbed up along the side of the building, you know, to like let you know. Right. Don't. So I just want to see that gust once. That's all cute. I'm saying.
Right. Yeah. Fortunately, I do think like in an animated series, I think they often, not necessarily every time, but like usually will show, no, look, they didn't die. They're okay.
The parachute from G.I. Joe. Yeah.
The Spider-Man is a poignant example though, because, you know, they did that musical and that was awful.
Oh yeah, that's.
Which underscores that falling from heights is very bad.
I really shouldn't laugh, but yes.
Yeah, no, it's not.
On this cheery note, we've been a little while. Does anyone have some last things they want to bring up?
I don't know. George Takei as Face Stealer Co.
Okay, I was wondering if that's who that was. I thought that's what his voice. Who that voice was. Which is fair because he runs the prison that is specifically mentioned in one of the other episodes, I believe. So, kind of glad that he still got in. It's fun to have him.
Yeah, I don't have anything to add to that. Just that he's fantastic. So
absolutely,
just keep putting him in things. Thank you.
Yep. No.
Yeah, I guess I would just add, like, I'm looking forward to seeing the last 2 episodes. I might watch them right after we wrap, and then I might watch all the episodes tomorrow, like while playing poker or something. I don't know.
Yeah,
we'll see. Like, I kind of really am looking forward to the feel of like seeing everything in a kind of like in a row, sort of like in my feeling, like as it's meant to be seen, as we have denied ourselves for all your podcasting listening pleasure.
Yeah.
We, it's not a show that like after the first 2 episodes, I was like, oh man, I like really have to watch 3 and 4 right away,
Yeah.
And honestly,
it helps that where the story's going.
It does. It does. Yeah. And it, I know we're building to a climax end of season, but like if we had done 1 episode at a time, I don't know. The first episode, I had a hard time getting through it. Like I literally turned it off twice and thought like, oh, do I have to tell Matthew that like, it's like you two have fun, and then
I was fully ready for it. And
no, I know. Yeah.
Especially like if Aang had reached for the meat, I was just going to be like, Paul, you're excused. You're done.
No, I would definitely want to be on that episode.
Yeah.
I'd have some words. But, but yeah, I feel like they have availed themselves well from where they started. And I did go back and rewatch like the bit that I'd skipped, and it was maybe not as bad as I thought it was maybe going to be, but like
really?
Yeah.
The temple assault.
Yeah. And like, maybe because I'd already seen further ahead,
Yeah.
But, and like, it is cool to see like airbenders do like cool airbender things. I mean, it sucks that they're all getting killed, but like, it actually did make it feel like, really? Like, could they really wipe them all out? Like, it feels like the airbenders are better
on any other day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I did kind of like that line too, like on any other day, you might be able to defeat me, but not today. But yeah, I feel like they've chosen a tone mostly. They've chosen a direction and made some serious choices that aren't the ones I would have made. But I think aside from some really on the nose dialogue, I think they've overall done a pretty good job of telling the story that they've decided to tell. And I just view it like I'm watching a different story about the same-ish characters. And some of the performances are really what sells it for me,
I think that's where I am. And we talked a lot, actually, before we sat down for this project about how did we want to do it, because both Paul and I really love binging. I think I generally prefer this method of consuming new media than waiting week to week, especially when it feels like there's artificial, cliffhangers and stuff like that. And I think we were correct that if we had watched all 8 episodes, when we tried to record on the first 2, we have already known where they were going. And I think it was actually helpful to be able to be like, yeah, we're watching this right after we've seen it. We don't know. And then, because then it feels a lot more satisfying to talk about these later things.
Mm-hmm.
And I think for me, at least, I feel like if I had binged this on my own, I would have been having so many feelings and how many, like, am I wrong? Does this feel really off? And like, it's felt really validating at times to have like us all agreeing on like, yeah, that felt really off, or like, this is kind of working. And, then a couple of times I'm way out in the woods, you two are somewhere else, and that's fine too. But I felt like I would have probably been stopping and like checking Twitter to like get all sorts of opinions before. So actually, I've really liked doing this, and I'm glad we've done this. I'm glad we're gonna wrap it up tomorrow. And then, I probably will sit down and watch the whole thing as well again. So, and I know that we have a number of kind of common this show is beloved to a lot of the people who've been on this podcast and been on our Star Wars podcast. So unsurprising, we're definitely going to have them come on as well. I'm supposed to say this at the beginning of the episodes. I'm getting better at that slowly, but it obviously did not come at the beginning of the episode, but we do have lots of social media. You can find us. The comment from You Know Nothing came through by email, but you can find us on email, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram. All the ways to do that are in the show notes. In the show notes also is, we're just going to our website, theethicalpanda.com. You can find out all the ways to become a member. As a member, you get bonus content, you get ad-free content, you get bonus content both at the end of every episode and as well as some bonus episodes, at least one a month. We're going to try and do more. And also, it's just a great way to help us keep the lights on. If you really like what we're doing, please like and subscribe. Please share these episodes with your friends. Please talk about them with others. Writing a review for us on Apple Podcasts or iTunes, I guess it's called, or any of the other wherever you get your podcasts. Writing reviews for us, like and subscribe. Become members. All of it's great ways to do it. So thank you all so much for listening. On behalf of myself, Riki, and Paul, thank you all so much. Yip, yip.
Oh, someone just became a member. The light went brighter. Nah.
I don't know what I'm supposed to say. Yip, yip
I was like, I
haven't
given Paul that right to that. What the hell? And we're done.